lucky. I listen. I'm lucky.
Takes too long. I like that. Here, you signed that.
Good evening, everybody. I'm over here. Hello.
Hello.
It is 6 p.m. and welcome. We appreciate everybody being here to the High School Triple M Site Selection Committee meeting. We thank our Site Selection Committee, which is seated in front of all of us on the dais. Everybody enjoys being up there under the light, yes? All right. But first and foremost, before we get started, today is May 4th, and I wish to say may the 4th be with us all. I knew there were other Star Wars nerds in the audience. We're going to go ahead and get started with our agenda with introductions. I'm Greg Blurton. I'm the Director of Planning, Growth, and Capacity here at the school district. And to my left...
Good evening. I'm Mark Mora. I'm the Executive Director of Operational Planning and Project Management for the district.
And to my right...
I'm Dawn Huff. I'm the long-range planner, and I work with Mr. Blurton.
All right, and we have some of our district staff in the audience over here. Robert Cody, you want to just wave your hand? He's our Executive Director of Transportation. And also Bill Law, our Chief Operations Officer, next to him. And Melissa Mickey with our Communications Department. And our Site Selection Committee will introduce themselves after I introduce our School Board Attorney, Keith Martin, who is over here, and he's going to take the first part of the agenda once our Site Selection Committee introduces themselves briefly. We'll start with Joan.
Okay. I'm Joan Downen. I'm from South Fort Myers High School.
I'm Barb Schoolmaker, a member of DAC for the West Zone.
I'm Tamika Woods. I am at Easley County High School and a member of DAC.
I'm Raleigh Scott. I'm with EDAC. I'm Andy Erickson. I'm the Vice Chair of DAC and also was elected to this committee. East Zone.
I'm Jeff Verzi with EDAC.
I'm Joe Ryder, Chairman of EDAC.
My name's Larry Rubel. I'm a member of the DAC representing the West Zone.
My name is Andrew Evans from Tanglewood Elementary, DAC member representing the South Zone.
All right. Thank you very much, Site Selection Committee, for your time, your efforts over these past couple weeks once you were appointed to the committee. We appreciate all the work that you've done. And just one note as we go through this, and as you have questions or comments, just make sure you bring your microphones up close to you so it can be heard and recorded. Our agenda for this evening, Mr. Martin is going to be stepping through the first part of it, our meeting structure, which is agenda item B, our school board policy, agenda item C, and also we'll talk and give guidance regarding how public comment will go for this meeting. And then Mark, Dawn, and I will go ahead and step through the agenda items E and F, which is the site selection process, matrix process, and the site analysis information. And then we have questions, comments that we can go from between the committee and ourselves. And then we will wrap up, and public comment will be in there depending upon where the Site Selection Committee decides to go. So with that, I will turn the meeting over to Mr. Keith Martin.
Good evening, committee members. Pleasure to be with you this evening. We want to get the meeting into your hands just as quick as possible, and the way for us to accomplish that is for you to elect a committee chair. So I'll guide you through that process at this time. Before I accept nominations for that position, are there any questions, any discussion we need to have at this point? Seeing none, I'll accept nominations for the position of chair of the Site Selection Committee.
I nominate Joe Ryder.
I have a nomination for Mr. Joe Ryder. Are there any other nominations? I have a nomination for Andy Erickson.
Andy Erickson. Andy is the first name. Andy, okay. Thank you, sir.
Any other nominations? Seeing none, we'll now close nominations, and I'll take a vote in the order of nominations. So first, all in favor of Mr. Joe Ryder to act as chair of the Site Selection Committee, please raise your right hand. I see two hands. All those in favor of Mr. Andy Erickson to act in the position of chair? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
You know a lot of people, don't you?
Very well. Mr. Erickson has been elected as chair of the committee. Mr. Erickson, the next responsibility for the committee is to establish the rules with respect to public comment. There are basically two issues that need to be addressed, and those are when the public comment will be received, at what portion of the meeting, and secondly, how much time will be allowed per speaker. So, Mr. Chair. your meeting.
Okay, I would say the first thing we have to solve is how much time we'll allow each speaker. I'm gonna just suggest that we have DAC. We had one the other night, and we had a lot of people wanting to speak on this issue. We gave them 2 minutes each, and it took like an hour and a half. So that's a lot of time. I would suggest less than the 3 minutes. Anybody have any suggestions?
Was it 2 minutes or 3 minutes we gave
I
them,
thought it
Andy?
was 3.
Three, yeah.
Normally, yeah.
I make a motion for 2.
We have a motion for 2.
I second.
Second over here. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All opposed? Okay. Motion passed. It'll be 2 minutes. Then we have to decide where on the agenda we want to have the public comment. Right now, they have it, one of the first things. Or we could have it, they had another agenda they had printed out, could be near the last part. Anybody have any suggestions?
I suggest moving it to the end,
To the end?
So we
Okay.
have all the information necessary to.
and they can hear everything that we're hearing as well, so it may sway their opinion
Making
as
that a
well.
motion?
I make that a motion.
Okay.
Just to clarify, are you saying before we get to item G, the recommended?
Right, before that,
Thank you.
Is there a
I
second?
will second that motion.
Okay, you got a second? Any discussion on that? Okay, let's do a vote. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, motion carried. I'm gonna put it right after we get the number F, the site analysis. We're gonna put it right before G. Gee whiz. One other thing to come up is, since we have 2 minutes, I happen to have been doing this a lot at DAC. And I usually use my watch, but I brought a stopwatch. Would anybody like to run the stopwatch? You got the 2 minutes.
I have a stopwatch on my phone.
This is an actual stopwatch. Just push it once and stop it.
Yeah, I have an actual stopwatch on my phone, yeah.
Okay?
So
So you'd like to do it?
I'll be happy to do that.
Anybody else? Just don't want to leave anybody out. Okay, you got it. So I think we got chair. Of course, the meeting purpose is to analyze and select which site is the best site. So, with all the information we get in, all the public comment. So, I think we're at C.
Yes,
Did I missed something, Mr. Martin?
No, sir. But, Mr. Erickson, with item C, the school board policy, I'll just briefly review, if I may, the responsibilities of the committee with respect to the policy. That is policy 9.01. And in defining the responsibility of this committee, the policy states that you shall review all proposed sites being considered for a new school location and provide comment on each individual site in an advisory capacity. So your responsibility tonight, of course, is to receive information between the two, concerning the 2 sites under consideration, to ask any questions you may have, to have discussion, and make a recommendation to the school board with respect to those 2 options. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have questions. First question is, after we have received all our information, are we going to take a vote?
Yes, sir. I would recommend.
Second of all, is there anything we have to go past that, or we have to give that vote to somebody, or speak to somebody about our vote, like the school board or somebody?
Well, this committee,
We'll end at that?
this committee can, as part of its responsibility, should provide a recommendation, which means a motion to second and a vote. Certainly, that recommendation will be presented to the school board at the time that superintendent presents his recommendation. The recommendation of each of the committees will be presented at that time also. I don't know if there's an intention to have a committee chair present that information at the time. I don't know if Mr. Blurton or Mr. Moore can address that.
I'm just asking, do we have to?
Yes, sir.
Or is, that's all?
The policy does not establish that responsibility.
Okay. Okay. So I think we're all set then.
Mr. Martin, I have a question regarding School Board Policy 9.01.
Yes, sir.
It speaks to acquisition, and there's a fair amount of language regarding recommendations for acquisitions and negotiations, but to all of the material that I've reviewed, these are school board-owned properties, and therefore there's no need to consider acquisition. Is that correct?
That's correct. In this situation, you're providing a recommendation with respect to two properties already owned by the school board.
Very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
All righty. So we're looking at site selection process, right? Is that you, Greg?
That is us. So Mark will go ahead and pull up our presentation. That's not it. And those of you on EDAC and DAC have seen this presentation. It's been updated since we've had our presentations to both EDAC, the Equity and Diversity Advisory Committee, and DAC, the District Advisory Council. So this PowerPoint will step through, again, the timeline to date, where we've been, where we are today, and where we're going. And then it will step through the site selection process and the site analysis for both of the properties. And then we'll be available for questions, comments, and for the committee to discuss the presentation and the information that you've been able to gather yourselves as you've been out to, I believe some of you or most of you have been out to the sites, questions that you have as you've been getting all the information over the past few days and weeks. Okay? So the timeline to date, again, we'll roll through this. This process began in November of 2016 and went up through February of 2017. Our school district's construction advisory committee, in their meetings, we've gone through the site selection process. It was discussed. Each of the different criteria and weighting factors that are used in scoring each of the sites was reviewed, and site visits for each property were scheduled. The Construction Advisory Committee, the members of that committee are typically members who have experience in construction of some form or another, planning, engineering, or work with construction companies. And so the site selection matrix that we went through and the criteria, we did spend time going through that so that they understood what we were scoring. March 1st was our first field trip. The Construction Advisory Committee visited the site on Gryphon Drive near Gateway. And then the day after, on March 2nd, the same committee visited the site in Alva, Joel and Tuckahoe. Then on April 5th, our site selection matrices were collected at the Construction Advisory Committee's regular meeting on April 5th to be tabulated by staff for the upcoming recommendation presentations, which on April 11th, the Equity and Diversity Advisory Committee met. They made their recommendation 6-4 for the Alva site, and they then appointed 3 of their members to this site selection committee, who introduced themselves to you this evening. Then on April 19th, the M site recommendation presentation was given to the District Advisory Council. The DAC recommended 36-12 in favor of the Gryphon Drive Gateway site. And then they appointed their 6 members to this site selection committee at that meeting, who introduced themselves to you as well. Then yesterday, May 3rd, the Construction Advisory Committee met at their regular monthly meeting, and they recommended for the Gryphon Drive Gateway site 9-1, and we reviewed their matrices, which we have a summary of here for you tonight as well. And that was scored in favor for the Gryphon Drive Gateway site, 3,037 to Alva's 2,343. And then here we are tonight, May 4th, for the M Site Selection Committee before us to make their recommendation at the end of this meeting, having heard all of the information, analysis, and public comment, to make their recommendation to the school board and superintendent, as well as the other committee recommendations will be presented at the May 16th school board briefing meeting. And then the board, the earliest is set to vote and approve the site selection is June 6th. So that's our timeline going forward. Okay. So the site selection process is made up, it established a basic set of selection elements and guidelines around social and land use factors, construction cost factors, and operations and maintenance cost factors. And a couple of things to point out in the social land use site factors, you know, some of the areas are size of site. Are they conducive to build a school? Proximity for future expansion opportunities, proximity to students, proximity to fire services, roadway capacities, those kind of criteria. The construction cost factors, and the important point here is this is site development costs. This is not construction costs to build a school. This is merely getting the site ready to build a school. And things that were taken into consideration and scored here were soils and foundation conditions, available of water and sewer utilities and power, ease of construction transportation, site drainage, wetlands, things of that nature. And then the last part was maintenance and operation cost controls, and really this was around energy. And two of the factors considered there were sun orientation and alternative energy sources. So each of the construction advisory committee members had this matrix and used a weight factor which applied to the values given for each of these different areas, and then were scored on a simple 5-point scale, 0 to 4. So they weighted each of the different areas. So for instance, in social and land use, size of site, is it conducive to build a high school? They would, if they thought that that was important, then they would weight that heavily, and then they would score it accordingly, 0 to 4. Proximity to students, roadway capacity, safe walking and biking, things of that nature. So they stepped through each of these different areas, scored it accordingly, and then turned those matrices in to staff, and we tabulated those. And we have that summary for you here in this presentation, which we'll show you. So Mark, the first site analysis information for the Gateway Gryphon Drive site.
Thank you, Mr. Blurton. I just want to point out that the site analysis that you're looking at right now is an amalgamation of analysis done by staff as well as the advisory committees, and we broke it down to kind of align with the site analysis tools that we've put in place and the requirements of the school district. I will point out as we start this review of the analysis is that the minimum acreage required or desired by the school district is a minimum of 40 acres. The property that you're looking at right now, property 1, is the Gateway Gryphon Drive property. It's right now sitting at 55.68 acres. Again, keeping in mind 40 acres is the minimum that we require for a school. Advantages, and we broke them down into both advantages and disadvantages in the context of what is the most viable site for the school that we're designing. The first thing we looked at as an advantage was the student population, and Dawn will share a slide with you that will show you where the population resides in regards to the location of both these sites. In the Gateway Gryphon property, there's a very large student population within 2 and 5 miles of this this site. That's important to note because a 2-mile radius is basically the limit in which students will walk to school. There's state statute that requires the district to transport students if they live outside of a 2.1 mile radius of a school or driving distance, as well as if there's any conditions that jeopardize the safety of students. So again, very large student population living around the Gateway Gryphon Drive site. Walkability is another important concept. Sidewalks are in place on Gryphon Drive at this time. There is a requirement when the school district does develop any properties to provide appropriate access for both vehicular and pedestrian traffic. So we will improve around that site and tie into any existing sidewalks if they are there. Traffic. There's quite a bit of traffic on State Road 82, as we all know right now, but there is a plan to widen that, and it's pretty much underway at this time. With looking at that schedule, it should be completed by the time that the school opens. Another good point to make in traffic, and this is a transportation concern, not just for buses, but for also parents that will be picking up, dropping off, as well as students that drive to school. There are multiple egress and ingress opportunities along Gryphon Drive to access this school. And that's important to note because we do not desire to commingle traffic on and off of our properties. That means separating bus traffic from student traffic. Site planning. Quite a bit of due diligence has already been completed on this particular parcel. And again, as I mentioned, the acreage here is more than adequate for a high school as well as future expansion. Another aspect that we look at is site development cost. How much will it cost the district to bring in the necessary utilities to operate a school? And when you look at the Gateway Gryphon Drive utility plan, a majority of those utilities are already in place. Water and sewer are already available in that community as well as to this site. And there has been some desire, and I will share with you that the academic programming for this school has not been finalized. It is something that we're working on parallel to the selection of the site as well as the design of the school. But there has been some committee and task force work done. About 1.5 to 2 years ago, we convened a committee of business, educational, as well as residents in both of these areas, and determined the types of programs that would be most conducive at any of these sites or in any of these zones. And environmental and sustainability is one of those things that emerged as something that people thought was important to consider with an academic program for a school in the E zone. And I'll share with you that there is room on this property for an environmental program. Of course, it's got to be scaled to what we have available after the footprint of the school is put in, but there is acreage there available for that program if it is selected to be opened at this school. Now let's talk a little bit about the disadvantages. Traffic. Again, it's an advantage that they're expanding it, but it's also a disadvantage if the schedule's not kept in the widening of 82, and that could have implications. But I remind you that this school is going to be here for more than 50 years, so an impact might be something that's short term. Site development costs, obviously, there are going to be things other than utilities that we'll need to bring to this site and improvements that need to be made. And there's quite a bit of mitigation that will be done on this property, as well as any property that the school district owns. So we've estimated a bit between 1.17 and 1.46 million for mitigation of the water. And we've got a letter of opinion from engineers that have weighed in and provided those costs to us. School siting concerns. There's a potential long-term environmental permitting process on this site. Right now, in our assessment and working with the Army Corps and Southwest Florida Water Management, we're looking at an 18 to 36 month term to get the permits necessary to construct on this site. There is possible endangered species that might need to be mitigated, as well as, I already mentioned, water and wetland mitigations that are going to be needed on that site. And I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Blurt to talk about property number 2.
Yes, property number 2, the Joe Boulevard Tuckahoe Road property out in Alva, is over 100 acres, 103.2 acres, of a larger site than the Gryphon Drive Gateway site. And similar as Mark had structured for the Gateway Gryphon Drive site, similar here with advantages and disadvantages for this site. Advantages, traffic, similar, there is multiple egress, ingress, so that's getting in, getting out to this site along Tuckahoe Road. Again, being able to separate that traffic, it's key when we're able to have multiple ins and outs to that site. And Tuckahoe Road, at least initially, is the main entry of this site that we foresee for this site. Also, site planning, most of this due diligence has been completed. When we say the due diligence has been completed, getting these advantages, disadvantages, the different site analyses that we're using, such as traffic, the site's school siting concerns, walkability, those kind of things, that's part of this due diligence, as well as any mitigation that might need to be done. So most of this due diligence has been completed for this site as well. And then with over 100 acres, there is more than enough acreage that is adequate for a high school, as well as future expansion. If there's an expansion need at this school, there's more than enough acreage to do that, even if we are not utilizing all of the site. As Mark had said, the minimum is 40 acres. That's ideal for us. There's plenty of acreage here for a high school on this site. And similar as what Mark had said, the environmental program acreage, obviously, the programming aspect of sustainability, environmental programming, this site is very conducive for that. Potential disadvantages, the student population. There is a very small number of students within the 2 and 5 mile area of this school site, and Dawn has a chart that she can show and answer questions if you have those. that shows the population for both sites. Walkability, there aren't any current or planned walkability to the school site. As Mark had said, we would provide that, but there's nothing to connect to currently. And traffic, they're not as conducive. The traffic out that way is not anywhere near the traffic that is out on State Road 82. Or even potentially Gryphon Drive. When we say that the roads are maybe not as conducive for the bus traffic to support the school buses, and we would, talking with Robert and his team, it would be approximately 35 buses needed to get to that school. The roads are narrower than they are on Gryphon Drive, just simply because Gryphon Drive has more improvements and the sidewalks. So that's a potential thing that we would have to mitigate. And then the site development costs for this site, approximately $2.93 million to $3.25 million for utilities. We would need to install the utilities out on this site, as well as the same mitigation for the Gryphon Drive site. It has a potentially long environmental permitting process, albeit the potential here is shorter because we believe the wetlands permitting would take potentially a little less longer. The 16 to 24 months, and then also possible endangered species mitigation and wetland mitigation is needed on this property as well. Here is the student population cluster map. You see Gryphon Drive Gateway in yellow on the bottom, and the Joel Boulevard Tuckahoe Road site in purple on the upper right. And the numbers on the right, Dawn can speak to each of the numbers to talk about the student population within 2 to 5 miles of each site.
So when we analyze property, part of the process is looking at the number of students within 2 and 5 miles. This is beneficial for, obviously, you look at a site and you want to know the population, and that's beneficial for transportation as well. So busing students to and from and the distance is very important. As you'll see here, the Joel Tuckahoe site, I pulled the data in reference to all students, which is just under 500 students within 2 miles, and just over 2,500 students within 5. Now, we did want to obtain a little more detailed data because of the students that will potentially go into this school. So we pulled the data for the 5th through 9th grade students, and that's 185 within 2 miles, and just over 1,000 within 5 miles. The Gryphon site is obviously, as Mr. Mora and Mr. Blurton has said, is substantially more. The Gryphon site has just over 5,000 students within 2 miles, and it has just over 14,000 students within 5. The 5th through 9th graders has just over 1,800 within 2 miles, and over 5,000 students within 5 miles. And this is definitely a issue that we need to be concerned with as far as, like I said, for transportation as well as parents and, you know, what's available for students and accessibility.
Our next slide, and before I get into this and we get into the questions and comments, we can go back to any one of these slides as well too. So I know we're going through this.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
What about the busing when you talk about the 2 schools? How many buses will it take to do both of them?
So approximately, and it's estimated that the Joel Boulevard Tuckahoe Road site would need 35 buses,
What about Gateway?
and Gateway would need 24.
Thank you.
Our next slide is the Construction Advisory Committee's site selection matrix scores. So this is a summary of each of those areas that I had talked about when we started the presentation. So as you have in front of you, it steps through the social and land use factors in yellow, which is on the left in the PowerPoint presentation. The middle, which is pinkish, is the construction cost factors. And then the darker red pink is the maintenance and operation cost factors. And what you'll see in front of you is it will go through each of the different criterion. So there were 24 in all. Social land use factors, size of site, gateway, the color coding on the right, gateway is blue, alva is green. So size of the site, in this instance, gateway had 159 points scored, alva 191 points scored. And as you step through, proximity of students, all the way down to number 12, noise and sound levels, and then subtotal, the social and land use factors, Gateway scored 1,569 to Alva's 1,334. Stepping through the construction cost factors, so the middle part of the PowerPoint slide, again going through soils and foundation conditions, availability of water, sewer, power, roadway capacity, safe walking and biking. As you step through each of those, again Gateway in blue, Alva in green, subtotaling Gateway scoring 1,324 to Alva's 871. And then the last two, maintenance and operation cost factors, sun orientation, alternative energy sources, Gateway 144 to Alva 138, for a grand total of the overall site selection matrix of Gateway 3,037 to Alva's 2,343. Okay. And then our final slide, it's a little hard to see. This is the projected school construction timeline, taking into consideration the permitting process of being as long as up to 36 months. That is a potential, but just based on our experience, recent experience with Bonita Springs High School, with similar wetland and endangered species mitigation that had to be done, we were expecting that to take less time, more in the 18-month range, possibly 24 at the most. So this projected school construction timeline is projected, but we are still shooting for the school opening up in the beginning school year of 2020, so the 2020-2021 school year. And I believe that's our last slide. It is. So you've had some time with the information that we've sent to you when this committee was formed. We've gotten questions and we've sent out information, so we've been communicating. I'm sure you have questions. I'm sure you have questions amongst yourselves, questions for staff, as well as comments. So this is your time now. We turn it over to you, and again, we are available to answer your questions and go from here. Mr. Chair.
Any questions, anyone?
Yes, I have some questions. At the DAC meeting, gentlemen, you spoke of the current high schools being at capacity, if not over. Have you done a population increase or a synopsis to show how quickly the East Zone is going to expand?
We have. I had mentioned in that DAC meeting that, and I think Dawn is pulling up that information. I had mentioned in our in that presentation at DAC that our East Zone high schools are at capacity, if not over capacity, and if we had all the capital funding in the world, money were not an issue, this school would actually be opening this next school year. That's that we need it now. Unfortunately, that's not the case. That's not reality, and so it is the 2020-2021 school year. Even with Triple M opening in the East Zone, whether it be at Gryphon Drive or Joel and Tuckahoe, we will need another high school in the East Zone pretty soon after that. And again, you know, it's better for us. We have district property. If we are able to use it, we have sites that are conducive for it. So the East Zone capacity, Lehigh Senior, East Lee County, Riverdale, and Dunbar is actually a multi-zone high school. They are all pretty full, and we need another high school in the East Zone. That was one of the slides that we had in the DAC committee, and the EDAC was showing that utilization and capacity. The East Zone is our highest growth area currently. The South Zone's behind it, and the West Zone is behind each of those. So we project this high school and another high school right after that here within the next, I'd say, after Triple M is built, within the next 5-7 years max, depending again on capital.
I have two more, please, Andy. Go for it. The widening of 82, will we be losing any frontage property to that widening?
No, we will not. And there's a right-of-way already, and we are actually, we will be working with the county to have a right-out only on 82, possibly. That's what we would like, and that's communication that we'll have with them.
Okay, my third question is sidewalks and lighting are the responsibility of the school district only for school-owned property, correct?
Yes, correct. We are required to make those improvements on our property, as well as improvements up to 200 feet on either side of the opening.
Up to 200 feet.
Yeah.
So in other words, thinking about the Alva property, which I toured, from that point on, it's desolate, and it's really, is the county, have you been in discussion with the county about what their responsibilities are going to be?
We have, and that in the slide, there's no current or future improvements to either of those roads currently. With the school going there, it is possible that they may say, okay, you know, this will be an issue.
Find the money to do something.
Correct.
Thank you.
What's the closest utilities for the connection of the water and the sanitary? Like, how many miles? Is there sanitary in that area already in Alva?
No, there's not, and it's
And what would be your closest connection to that? I understand around, is it 10 miles, 5 miles?
it's a little over 10 miles.
10 miles, okay.
And Mr. Verzi, if I may interrupt here, we have typically put in waste treatment plants in schools that don't have a financially feasible connection. We did that at Mariner High School, and now they're making improvements in the Cape that we can discontinue the use of that wastewater treatment plant. But that's typically what we do when we don't have that connection.
Okay, so say we do the treatment plant. Where is that just gonna go, like, what do I wanna say?
Septic field?
Like septic, and it's gonna go into a leach? And then out?
I'm not particularly sure what system they'd put in and how they'd use it and how that operates. I do know that obviously we don't connect anything, so it probably would be some system similar to what you've described.
Okay. Now, I'm in the construction trade. I'm a mechanical contractor. If you did have to use the sanitary connection and a water to the school, your future, you would have to actually have it sized by an engineer in order for future development of the area. So that would be, you know, anywhere from $10 to $15 million just to do that. Plus you have pump stations for your sanitary, you know. So this, going out in Elva, I don't think would be a good justice for the school district. Go into Gateway where you already have the facilities, use that. And then, is that Henry County? If you would had to use the sanitary and the water, would you be paying Henry County for the water and the sanitary to be, or is that still Lee County out there?
It's still Lee County.
Okay.
One of the other things that I researched was the Alva property, you would have to maintain a sizable, substantial water supply under pressure for fire. So you would be having some huge holding tanks just sitting there holding water in case there was a fire. That's another expense that if you use water and sewer hookup, you don't have to have because the hydrants are there and they are pressurized.
Anyone else have a question?
Yep.
Yep, down here.
Go ahead with him first.
Ms. Huff, is that the correct? How long, on your slide up there, it showed populations, correct? Or the student populations?
Up on the screens.
Okay, so looking at that slide right now, what's the capacity of the school going to be, first of all?
2,000.
2,000. So based on what you've got up there right now, how many students would start in the yellow zone? How many students would start in the purple zone? And how long would it take the purple zone, which has less students, I presume, to fill that school?
It should be pretty quick. Basically, I know we talked about the numbers.
I mean, the way that we would open the school, similar to how we're doing with Bonita Springs, is we would stage the school, and I'll use Bonita Springs as an example. And Mark, you can jump in as you're right in the middle of it. So this next school year, Bonita Springs High School will officially open in a portable campus at Estero High School with their freshman class of approximately 275 students. And then over the next 3 years, when the school opens in the 18-19 school year, that freshman class will move over to the new facility, and we will have they will now be sophomores, and we'll have another freshman class. And there will be students that will request to transfer in as juniors. We don't foresee a lot of seniors wanting to transfer to a new school. They've already been at a school where they are. It's always possible. So the school will begin to fill with that initial freshman class and classes coming in with transfers as well. And we would foresee a similar opening for this school, whether it be at Gryphon Drive, Gateway, or in Alva. Staging the freshman class. We do have some of our schools that have some property where we could put portables if need be, if we are going to stage at a location other than the site itself, depending on the permitting and the construction timeline. And then from that point, once the students, it would be a similar phased approach with freshman class becoming sophomores, a new freshman class. Going back to our point about the East Zone, our high schools, with our plan for student assignment and our school choice, we have our East Zone where, as it's set up right now, the Gryphon Drive Gateway would be in our E2 zone, and the Joel Tuckahoe would be in our E3 zone. Students that live in E3, and for the audience, I apologize, we don't have our school choice map up, but basically the way school choice works is we have our 3 zones, west, east, and south. We're talking about west tonight. East. Thank you. East, and each of our zones have 3 subzones, and in the East Zone there's E1, E2, and E3. And the way, when you are an enrolling 9th grader, if you're an incoming freshman and you're going through school choice open enrollment January through March, you select your schools, and what schools appear on your list depends upon which subzone you live in. And if you live in E3, such as Eastleigh County High School or the proposed Joel Tuckahoe, you have access to the high schools that are in E3 and E2. And in E2, you have Lehigh Senior. If you live in the E2 zone, you have access to all of the East Zone. The way that it works is if you live in the middle, you have access to all because you're centralized. So you would have access to Dunbar because it is a multi-zone school. You would also have access to Riverdale and the proposed Gateway Gryphon site. And if you live in E1, you have access to the E2 in Lehigh, exactly, to Lehigh Senior.
So just to continue on what Mr. Blurton was making his point is, if a school lies in E2, any kid in the East Zone can select that and be assigned to that school. So a school at Gryphon Drive will be able to accept any student from the East Zone. If the school was located in E3, such as the Alva site, only students from E2 and E3 could select that school as their school choice under our current plan. So there's a bit more availability in the way the plan is written now for students to attend the Gryphon Drive school if it was built there.
So the Alva location, you would have to bus the majority of those students in to fill that population as it stands now, according to your population map. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Want to find out something else. When you talk about 2,000 students for Alva, how many will be the population of students, you might say, fulfilling Gateway? Is it 2,000 also?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Question?
Yeah. You were talking about staging and the possible schools. Which schools were you looking at staging for Gateway or for Alva?
We haven't gotten to that point yet. The sites that do have potential availability for portables would be Lehigh Senior is the primary one. Lehigh Senior is our highest capacity, highest utilized school in the East Zone. It does have some land available. One of the things that we are also doing, in addition to district-owned sites, vacant land that is conducive for a school, whether it be high school, elementary, or middle, is what sites that we currently have schools on have land available to expand. And Lehigh Senior is one of those schools that has that potential, not just for portables to stage a school, but also for long-term, for more classrooms. So that is one of the, that's at least the first potential school that we could potentially stage for that school.
Also, you suggested that the academic programming there was going to be environmental sustainability.
We said it is conducive for that, as
Yeah.
it is, on both sides of Alva and Gateway of proponents for the site, that kind of programming, and that's programming that we are going to have at Bonita Springs High School, and see how that goes as well. So it is a potential, absolutely.
Is there anything that's not a potential?
I would let Mark answer those questions.
Yeah, certainly that's the analysis that we need to still make, dependent on where this site is, what site is selected. A lot of it is driven by where the school is and doing an assessment of what the community's needs are, what the interest of parents in that area are, and what the incoming students in that area would be. So that's the level of assessment we do when we start to develop programming. And engaging businesses in the area as well is also important. So the mention that we don't have programming in place already is because of that. But we do have a good idea of workforce needs, high wage jobs that are going to be here in Lee County or Southwest Florida for over the next 15, 20 years. So those are kind of the guiding forces and factors. So that's why we don't have one nailed down right now. And when I mentioned environmental or sustainable as an academy or a focus, and that was all brought out by that task force I mentioned that got together 2 years ago. But they've also brought suggestions forward for aviation, for technology, for business, for hospitality. So keep in mind that most of our schools don't have a singular focus. They have multiple academies because we know that students have various interests. And our job as a school district is to tap into the potential of all students and offer the programming that they are interested in.
Mostly I'm kind of wondering about the IB program. We have two. We got Dunbar and Riverdale, right? And also the ACE and arts, because I know that a lot of what we're trying to do is to keep all the zones equal. And by adding to one, you kind of leave a void in another that needs to be filled. I didn't know if we even had enough population to support like a third IB program or a second ACE program, a second Cambridge. Dunbar seems to be the only STEM and arts as well. Do we have the ability to have multiple in the East Zone? Or is that something that would cause an issue down the line with equity and fairness?
Joan, that's a great question. That's something that we haven't considered in selecting a site, but Dr. Hackins has made it our charge to assess all of our current rigorous academic programs, looking at the types of students that are gaining entry into them, as well as the success of those programs. So as we consider academies and rigorous programs for either of these two sites, that's an assessment we need to make. And one of the things that we also want to do is when you determine what program you want to put in one of these schools, one of these properties, is what effect does it have and what detriment might it have on those other programs in other schools. And I'll share with you that analysis has not been done. Certainly we'll start in earnest once a site is selected. Is definitely at the top of the list. We typically, after a site is selected, begin the process of determining what's the best academic programming, engaging academic services and school development in that discussion. So those are all forthcoming. They're all interesting topics. I certainly have an interest in it. But right now, those aren't things that have driven which site is better than the other. But definitely an assessment that will be made once a site is selected.
Mr. Moore, isn't my understanding that Riverdale's a full IB and Dunbar is just a partial? In other words, it's a certain IB. Was it Microsoft or what is it?
Yeah, certainly you're correct. Their programs are IB programs, but they're quite different. The Riverdale is the full IB as people know it. The IB program at Dunbar is designed a little bit differently to surround around careers. So technology is their focus. It's a STEM school. So the IB program is more of a certificate in career readiness, but still a very rigorous program, but tied to more of a career orientation.
Just a comment, Eastleigh County next year will have Cambridge.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So,
Well, this is a site selection committee, not a academic committee.
I was just
so
trying to correct that. Was she
I
worried
understand,
about that
but-
site?
We're getting kind of off.
track.
The reason I asked these questions is because when we got the breakdown of all the students and where they attended from each of the populations, what we had heard so many times from the public comments was that Gateway wanted something close. They wanted a school close to home. So I wanted to know where they were going, if they weren't going close to home. And that's what that breakdown told me, was that a quarter of the students that come out of that circle in the Gateway area were going to Riverdale. Of course, I'm going to assume they're going to the IB program, but I don't know. And that was what was driving my question, was literally the busing and the cost of busing, because if they're attending to the IB, we're not going to save money on busing. That was where my questions were aimed at. And I also had one more question. Is it possible that, you said you needed a minimum of 40, is it possible that too much acreage can be deemed unusable at Gateway, since it's kind of close to the 40? Could more than 18 acres or 15 acres, whatever it was, be deemed unusable through mitigation that would make it unusable? And then what would we do if it were?
The wetland mitigation, it's approximately 13 acres, according to our consultant, when they went out and surveyed the wetlands. And with the wetlands, the mitigation for the wetlands, once the wetlands have been mitigated, we can use the whole site. And that's what the cost for the mitigation is to mitigate the wetlands mitigation. So once that has been done, the whole site can be used.
And it's possible to do that?
Yes.
Okay.
I have 3 questions, the last of which is probably for Mr. Cody. My first question is, I'm seeking clarification regarding the weighting for the Construction Advisory Committee. So each member of the committee assigned their own weight 1 to 3 for each of the 24 elements. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so there was no, there were no control factors then on the weighting.
When we had gone through the site selection matrix process with the Construction Advisory Committee at that time in that first meeting in February, and stepping through that, the staff liaison at the time, as they went through that, explained what each of the different areas meant and how that relates to selecting a school site for the school, as far as proximity to students, roadway, traffic, what is deemed. All of these factors are important because they're on the matrix, but each of them then score based on their expertise and going through each of these with the weight, and then their ultimate score is 0 to 4 on each of those areas.
Okay. The second question is regarding the cost per bus of 30. Excuse me. That should be my third question, since I think that's directed to Mr. Cody. So the next question that I had was regarding, no, I apologize, I made a note that was answered. So I only have 2 questions. So this one is for Mr. Cody, I believe. $35,000 per bus. Is that a district average?
Yes, sir. When we do the cost of bus, first of all, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, committee, as well as Mr. Martin. The cost of bus is equated based on a bus operator's wage, as well as the cost of fuel, maintenance, and depending upon the age of that fleet of bus, the year of that bus, that equates to the cost. It's actually a little higher than $35,000. I just rounded it off.
Sure. And buses that have to travel longer distances are going to have higher operating costs and probably also higher maintenance costs for wear and tear. But using the $35,000 and a difference of 45% higher need for buses, we're looking, and that $35,000 is per year.
Correct.
So that looks to be about almost a
$0.2 million.
$400,000 annual difference in busing costs.
Correct. When you look at the 2 sites and the comparison between the 2 sites, Tuckahoe is more so compared to Eastleigh County High School with the sheer number of buses and the student population surrounding that area. So that means that students are going to be bused in from greater distances. The average cost per year for buses at Tuckahoe will be about $1.2 million, as opposed to Gateway, which will be about $840,000. Due to the numbers, if you compare the 2 sites Tuckahoe is comparable to East Lee County. Gateway is more comparable to the South Zone schools due to the gated communities and the number of students that surround that area. So it'll be more comparable to an Estero High School. And that's how we forecasted our number of buses.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Don't leave. One more question for you. You told us what the cost to run the bus and costs like that. But what does it cost to buy the bus? Because you're going to have extra buses at one site than you do the other.
Transportation tried to run because we were constantly in motion. I knew that question was coming about. The average cost per bus is $102,000. At the lowest end of the spectrum, Bluebird bus is about $99,000. International bus, which Wallace International for our local people that travel down Edison Avenue, it's about $102,000. And a Thomas-built bus, which is aerodynamically different from the school buses, the traditional, conventional school buses, runs about $105,000. Now, they mentioned programming. If we add the lift buses for our students with disabilities, those come at a greater cost.
I did know the answer.
Question's
It's
about
in the paper
102,000.
this morning.
Pardon me?
The bus costs were in the paper. How many buses you're buying, you can just divide it out.
58.
Thank you.
190 was purchased in September, and we have all of those buses, by the way.
They look great, yeah.
Keep it clean.
Any other questions from the committee? I believe we're done with the site analysis, and we should start with the public comment. Correct? Okay. We start with public comment, and are we set up for the microphones there or there?
It's on each side.
Okay. Public comment. Remember, you only have 2 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Ellen Erickson, and I've lived in East Lee County for 45 years, so I'm very familiar with the east end of town. My kids have gone all the way through school. I've served on SAC at numerous schools, and I'm still involved as a volunteer. I live in Alva, and I urge you to put the school in Gateway. Alva is a rural community. We're not trying to grow. We're trying to keep it rural. It's surrounded by at least an acre per home site. Most of them are 2.5 to 5 to 10 acres. We're not going to have the population to support this school. So the figures you saw up there are going to go on for year after year after year. We want the money in the classroom. We don't want it in the busing. I urge you to do that and not put kids at risk where we don't have sidewalks and don't want sidewalks. We have rural lanes. We want them to be rural lanes. That's why we like the country. So I urge you to ask the superintendent and the board to put the school on the site on Gryphon Road. Thank you.
I'm here tonight to express my opinion on the issue of the new proposed high school. When I moved to Lee County in 2006, my grandchildren were infants. Now they're getting ready to go to middle school. I believe they deserve a high school in closer proximity to where they live. In looking at the current map of Lee County and the location of high schools in my area, I realize that the northeast area of Lehigh has been neglected. Students need to have a high school that is located in reasonable proximity to their neighborhoods. This proximity helps students in many ways, least of which is being able to participate in after-school activities and sports. Furthermore, that kind of location gives a feeling of community. In addition, parents feel connected to the school when they can attend children's activities and parent and teacher conferences. The location of a new high school in the Alva-Tuckahoe area is needed. This location has many benefits to Lee County schools. First of all, because of the rural nature of this site, a curriculum in environmental and agricultural sciences could be implemented in an academy using resources already available. In addition, the current College Board Advanced Placement course of environmental science could easily be offered without additional burden to the school district. Many people think Florida's economy is based only on tourism and hospitality, but they are wrong. The most important part of Florida's economy is agriculture, both in growing crops and in managing animals. No other high school in Lee County addresses this important issue. In addition, the Joel Eco Park, to be developed on 30 acres opposite this new school site, would be an invaluable resource to a curriculum that stresses conservation. Second, this site is located near many of the county's conservation areas.
Your 2 minutes are up. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. I am also a parent, and I've lived in Gateway for 10 years. I can tell you right now that there is only one person that I know that has ever gotten their first choice when it comes to school choice in Gateway. This is not a joke. We get the percentage, and Gateway residents are like, what? How is this? Nobody ever gets their first choice. So what I'm presenting is we want Gateway to have a high school. So we have a choice, and that Gateway residents have a voice. You brought up about going to Riverdale, about IB. My kids, I have 2 in high school, that we have to drive them on a busy road 45 minutes to get to Riverdale. They are both in IB, and the reason why they're in IB is so they would go to a school, not because of the IB program, because we would be reassured that they would get into a school that we accept, that we would want. That's how sad it is. That's how hard it is to find a high school in our zone that we can support. And that's the only reason. And after 2 years, my kids are going to be going out of IB program to do dual, because that's the only reason why we did IB, is to get into that high school. Gateway needs a high school. I pray that you guys can see all of these statistics and understand what we need. We want our voices heard. We're parents, we're concerned. We will support a high school if you put it in Gateway. We love our kids, we love our neighbors' kids. They go to schools right now that I look at the bus stop in the morning, there's 6 buses, 6 from different high schools that come in our neighborhood to pick up kids. It's crazy. And we're in a small neighborhood of 200. This doesn't need to be the way.
Your 2 minutes are up.
For the minutes, could you please state your name, ma'am?
Angie Cooper.
Thank you. If you could each do that before you speak, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the work that you've done leading up to this process. My name is Robert Vertrees. I'm a Gateway resident. I'm here to argue as strongly as I can that you put the high school in Gateway. I'm a parent of 10-year-old triplets. Just picked out their 6th grade school. I'm going to be going out to Lehigh Acres. We got in there. But that's a heck of a long drive, regardless of whether it's going to be on the bus or whether it's going to be in the car. Their mom and I haven't figured that part out yet. But in 3 years, it should be great if we could pick out the high school that's going to be 2 miles up the street, and we could have the kids go there. Gateway is a fantastic community. When we moved down here in 2011, I have a brother that lives in one of the Gateway communities. I have 2 sisters-in-law that live in different Gateway communities. I work with the Gateway Flag Football League, the Gateway Soccer League there. I see the community spirit that we have. You can put a high school there and rest assured it's going to be loved and taken care of by the members of the community. And again, you've seen the data. I don't think there's a question that the data supports Gateway. I hope that you guys will as well. Thank you very much again for your time and your efforts.
My name is Jonathan Heck, and I am in 4th grade at Gateway Elementary. And I live in Gateway, and I would really like to have a high school in my community.
Thank you.
My name is John Heck, also. And I want to thank the committee and the members of the district for all the hard work. I've been following this and advocating for the school in Gateway now for a very, very long time. One of the things that wasn't mentioned here is starting to come to the surface now is the support for the school in Gateway. Back in March, when the Construction Advisory Committee came out to visit the site, we had more than 100 people who turned out in support of that school. About 30 or 40 of them were children wearing orange t-shirts like you see here. And the committee showed up at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which means that the parents thought enough of this school to stop what they were doing and interrupt their child's school day to sign them out of school and have them present for this school. When you contrast that to the site visit out in Alva, I understand there were about 12 or 15 or so people that showed up and only about a quarter in support. To me, that speaks volumes. Besides that, and many of the issues that were raised here tonight, personally, I can't think of a single reason to build a school of this size in a community who largely doesn't want the school out there. With a population, as the numbers point out, cannot support it at a cost that would have to be millions of dollars more over and above just the construction cost alone, as was pointed out by Mr. Verzi earlier, not to mention the ongoing costs of busing. You know, at $100,000 a bus and $35,000 per bus times 35, that's a lot of money every year compared to the estimate of 24 buses. I'd be surprised if there were 24 buses, quite frankly. This is not an issue affecting only Gateway and Alva residents.
2 minutes are up. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Denise Eberly. I live in Alva, and Alva Inc. does not speak for me. I request that the high school be put at Gateway for all the reasons that we were just shown here, mostly because of the cost and expenses and taxpayer dollars. It just makes no absolute sense not to put a school in the farthest point of Lee County when the population is further west and south. I just wanted to bring another enlightenment on additional cost of this school if it was in Alva, other than the building the school and getting it prepped with mitigation, which is twice as much as Gateway, by the way, for the mitigation. You also have to consider, like was said, it's not a hookup to water and sewage. It has to be built and put in. Wells, septic tanks, treatment plants, water holding, retention ponds, all of this stuff. Plus, there's going to be some more engineering because that area is very susceptible to flooding. That is a water flow, a sheet water flow, and that water flows to the river and flows into the creeks and the multiple ditches that are around there, if you've seen them all. They go into our creeks and then into the river. So so I'm sure some engineering is probably going to have to be done, and I'm not a big fan of engineering because engineers cost us more problems than benefit. So to go on further from that, to make it quick, to keep that stuff maintained annually is a huge expense. If you're hooked up to Gateway, you're hooked up to city water, sewage, you already have the utilities, you have the electric, you're probably going to have to put a whole new electric grid out in Alva. And we don't have roads and streets, and we have little tiny roads, which you could barely put 2 cars behind, pass each other, never mind foot traffic, forget, there's no room. And so the safety issue is there also.
2 minutes are up. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Don Ruane. I live in Alva for the past 24 years. I'm in favor of the Alva site. Regarding utilities, information given to the Construction Advisory Committee indicated utilities could be brought in from FGUA from about 2¼ miles away. This is not unprecedented. As Mr. Moore said, the school district has run lines to Mariner. They also had FGUA lines extended out to East Lee County High School about 8 years ago when it opened. Regarding traffic, the roads are wide enough for vehicles. School buses run on all the roads around the Alva site now. I know that because I followed some of them the other day and saw that. And back to utilities, one more thing. You could build a package plant and you do not have to service the surrounding areas with it. You could contain it to one site. I don't believe you would be running up into the $10 million thing category, but I'm not an engineer. I don't know that for sure. On school buses, how many of the school buses that you would need to service either one of these sites are currently running routes now, and would they be rerouted in order to serve Alva or the Gateway site? The student population, if somebody could put that slide back up, it would be helpful for me. A lot of the students in the Gateway area live north of State Road 82. Because of the size of that road, when the school opens, if it's put there, those students would have to be bused. I'd also like to know the 2 and 5 mile rings for Lehigh Senior and East Lee, how much of that overlaps the Gateway rings that are up there now? And what students would continue to go to these other high schools or pick the charter school there in already existing in Gateway with a couple hundred vacant seats?
Your 2 minutes are up. Thank you.
Julian Heck, and my name is Julian Heck, and I am in 2nd grade at Gateway Elementary. I live and play in Gateway, and I would love to go to high school in my community. Alva is too far.
My name is Ruby Daniels. I live in Alva, and I am president of Alva Inc. And we do support a school in Alva with a strong emphasis on environmental science, coupled with a strong emphasis on agricultural science. Alva site is the place for that kind of program. It has the best facilities to support that kind of program. In all of the discussion about where the next high school is going to be built, we've also heard some talk about the need for a middle school very soon in our East Zone. So I would like to, if I were a member of this board, I would like to ask how great is the need for a new middle school in that area, and how pressing is that need going to be in my discussion of site selection. Also, as a former teacher, I spent the last 12 years of my career teaching environmental science to elementary students. And so I wonder, when you talk about mitigating wetlands on the Gateway site, how you're going to teach an environmental education program, because you need an environment to study. And I know from my experience that you can't teach a good, well-rounded environmental science program inside 4 walls in a classroom. You do part of the education there, but the majority of what you do has to be outside in the environment. And I know that people have talked about taking field trips to do that, but I know there are certain restrictions on field trips. So I would just like to have those 2 questions discussed by this committee, please. Thank you.
My name is Aiden Prasad, and I attend Gateway Elementary, and I'm in 4th grade. As a violinist and athlete, I would like for there to be a Gateway High School with a great music program and athletic program.
My name is Levi Vitter, and I am in 2nd grade. I live in Gateway. I would love to go to school at Gateway High School. I am asking you to please choose Gateway. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Christina Centron. As a parent that lives outside of Gateway, I work as a teacher inside of Gateway, and I have 5 children, 3 of which have gone to 3 different high schools in Lee County, one in the South Zone, Gateway Charter, which was brought up earlier, and I've actually pulled 4 of my children out of the Gateway Charter program, and my one child was homeschooled for 10 years. This is because as a teacher and a parent, I believe that no child fits one mold, but I do believe that Gateway High School would give another option for families in Gateway, that they wouldn't have to cross-zone waiver as we have for the past 4 years, wouldn't have to juggle working and homeschooling your special needs child, and wouldn't have to put your child in a charter school that has 10 teachers in 1 year because of a high turnover, because it's ran more like a business than a school. So please vote for Gateway.
My name is Nathan Vitter, and I'm in 6th grade. I've lived in Gateway for 8 years. I attended the last meeting, so I know that you already know how many students are in the area of the Gateway school site. Throughout my years at Gateway Elementary School, many of my friends and classmates lived in Lehigh. There are lots of Lehigh neighborhoods right across the street from the school site, and it is also very close to the Lehigh neighborhoods like Olympia Point, Sherwood, and Westminster. I think the Gateway location will be very convenient and beneficial for the Gateway students and also lots of Lehigh students. I'm asking that you please choose Gateway for the next new high school. Thank you.
My name is Keith Browning. I am a product of the Lee County District School Board. I went to school in Lee County from kindergarten through 12th grade. As Mrs. Cooper mentioned, I have 2 high schoolers who ended up going to Riverdale so that they could get into Riverdale. They're both IB students and have since moved on to dual enrollment at FSW. I also have 2 young elementary school kids that are in the audience. One's in 5th grade, one's in 3rd grade. 5th grader will be attending high school in 2020. As a Lehigh resident, when I was younger, I traveled those winding, foggy roads to Riverdale High School day in and day out. Fast forward 26 years, I did that for 2 years with my 9th grade and 10th grader as a parent. I don't want to have to do that again, put a school in Gateway, so these 2 young men behind me, we don't have to put together a crazy carpool system to get them to school safely or spend an hour on the bus each way. Thanks.
My name is Catherine Sage. I live in Alva, and I support the high school in Gateway. I have never understood how anyone ever considered putting a high school in Alva right now when Gateway was a possibility, because it's such a nice community, and nobody's, I mean, there are so many people that live there and pay taxes there, and they don't get a high school because it's going to go way out by us. I mean, there's always time in the future for another high school in Alva if somebody feels that, you know, it's needed out that way. But right now, they already need a high school. And I just wanted to say that this gentleman here, Jeffrey, if I might call you by your first name because I can't see your last name, you said it's about justice to the school district. And that's what has been in my crawl this whole time, going to all these Alva meetings, is it's about justice to the school district. It's not about the curriculum. The site isn't being selected. This gentleman said it's not being selected because of the curriculum. It's being selected because of where it needs to be, where it's best use of taxpayer dollars, and where the students really need it. It's very hard to stand up here and do this. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jessie Hansen-Vitter, and I live in Gateway, and I'm here to ask you to put the high school in Gateway. I'd like to start by, if everyone who's been involved all along knows that the main people rallying for the high school to be in Alva are Don and Ruby, and they previously have always said that they're here in representation of Alva Inc. If you'll go on Alva Inc.'s home main page, their mission statement states, and this says Alva Inc.'s welcome to the homepage of Alva Inc. The top says, dedicated to preserving the tranquility and beauty of Alva. And then their vision statement says, Alva's mission is to preserve and protect the unique historical, rural, agricultural, and equestrian ambience of Alva, Florida. A few lines down, it says, Alva is the oldest settlement in Lee County. It has a unique country flavor that is rapidly becoming hard to find in Florida. So I find it a bit confusing that they're fighting to have a high school that might be 2 to 3 stories of concrete and will probably have roughly, 2,500 people there per day once you add the staff in and everything, and their roads are gonna fill and everything. I feel they're contradicting their own mission statement. So that's made me curious the whole while what's really driving them. I'd just like to go over a few things that we don't know about Alva. We don't know where the research and who would teach these programs and what the exact curriculum of them would be. I was thrilled to hear tonight that there's actually room for a little bit of environmental studies at the Gateway site, because I think that's all you need is a little bit, because we have to keep in mind that lots of kids want to do sports or ROTC or technology classes or it's not going to be everybody's interest. Everybody's got their separate interests that they want to do, so I think that's sufficient. What we do know about Gateway, the students are there and ready to attend the school. More than enough to fill all the schools in the East Zone still, being that we have 5,555 within just 5 miles, so it's a 2,000 capacity school. We have enough to go around. The roads are already being widened.
2 minutes are up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dan Powers. I'm a local businessman on Tuckahoe Road in Alva, and I'm for the high school going in Gateway. We're against it being in our area. And I'm not going to be redundant. People have already gone over all this. But I'd like to strongly disagree with the notion that those roads are ready for it. I drive Tuckahoe, Packinghouse, and Stiles daily. You can't get 2 pickup trucks past each other. One has to yield to the other, not even talking about school buses. Another big concern for me is that the site is virtually surrounded on 3 sides by Conservation 2020 Scrub Jay Preserve. Those animals are very skittish, and I just don't figure out where a high school fits into all that. 2 days ago, a juvenile panther was spotted in my neighbor's yard just a quarter mile from that site. So I'd urge you to vote for the Gateway. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gina Heck, and as a parent and a resident of Gateway, I urge you to vote for Gateway. Clearly, I'm a numbers person. All the numbers point towards Gateway, but when it comes to my kids, it comes from my heart. And the distance to the East Zone high schools is just insane for us, particularly to the Alva School. It's 13 miles from Gateway to the Riverdale High School. That's a long way, and we've heard of too many fatalities involving inexperienced drivers on the dark, narrow, winding roads going to and from school. I don't want anyone else to lose their child. It's an unnecessary risk to take. Just keep it in the community. The roads in Gateway, we deal with the charter school traffic, the elementary school traffic. We deal with it. It's just part of life. We're a community, we're growing, and we love our community. So please consider Gateway. Thank you.
My name is Lucky Cintron, and I'm 13. Being an athlete, being the first one to do something is always kind of cool, and I want to be one of the first freshmen, junior, sophomore, seniors at Gateway High School.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Frances Cerniglia, and I'm a small business owner in Gateway. I own a private preschool there. I've also been an educator for 27 years, and I'm the mother of 3 children. My oldest son attended the Riverdale IB program and graduated 4 years ago. I put him on the bus at 5:26 a.m., and he didn't get to school for an hour and 20 minutes because of all the running around town they have to do to pick everybody up. My second son, at age 9 in 3rd grade when we first moved here, is a diabetic, and they wanted to put him on a bus and send him to Alva. Because I was not ready to put him on a bus going to Alva and being on that bus as a diabetic, not sure that his medical condition would be supported, I pulled him and put him in Gateway Charter, which we've heard about Gateway Charter having a high school there. He was there for about 3 years. I pulled him out finally, put him back into the public schools, only to find how far behind he was because the curriculum didn't support it. So I don't think we want to take Gateway Charter into consideration when we're considering whether or not we need a high school in that area. I left the public schools about 20 years ago now. And I left, and now I'm sitting here tonight, I'm like, oh, now I remember why I left. Because sometimes what is logically sitting right in front of us, for some reason, we make it so obscure. Well, you have to look at the advantages and the disadvantages. And when we talk about fiscal responsibility, this is a no-brainer. I mean, we need a high school. We need a high school now. Mr. Blurton said if money was an issue, we'd have to have one sooner. Well, obviously, money's an issue if we're not considering how we spend it. One of the disadvantages we saw up there was the fiscal amount, how much it would cost to develop both of these areas and get this off the road. For the Gryphon Road area, it was $1.17 million to $1.46 million. The Joel location is going to be $2.93 million to $3.24 million. That's a huge difference. The busing is a huge difference. Just look at the budget. I mean, one of the women here said, well, maybe we reconsider this. They said in another 7 years, we're going to need another high school.
Your 2 minutes are up.
Maybe that's the time for Alva. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Rose Carncross. I've lived in Gateway for roughly 10 years. Prior to that, I was in Lehigh for a year. I have two small girls, both attending Gateway Elementary. And, you know, it seems, as Ms. Franny said, a no-brainer. Every statistic that we've been shown, every study that we've heard about points to the need for the high school in Gateway. Bottom line for me is, I have two young girls. I do not want to ship them 13, 14, 20 miles away to get a quality education. I'd like them to be close to home, where they can be safe and receive quality education prior to going to college.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anand Prasad. I'm a Gateway resident. My son was up here a little bit earlier. My daughter, she's currently going to Riverdale High School, and that's a challenge. It's a daily challenge for her. She has to get up very early. You know, either she takes the bus and rides it for a long time, or we take her there and it's a long day. She has homework. If she has after-school activities, it makes it for a long day then for her to come back home. I mean, all the data show that it makes sense to have a high school in our Gateway, and I appreciate if you take your consideration to make that happen. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michelle Persad. I'm in favor of a Gateway High School. I moved here from Long Island, New York, 13 years ago, and I had no idea I'd be standing here voting for a high school for my children. My son came up earlier. He plays the violin. He's involved in sports. And there are a lot of students here, young students, that are involved in sports and other curricular activities. I'm not sure that we should just focus on environmental science as an option for the school. Gateway has many businesses. You've got Gartner, you've got Hertz, that's pretty close by. You've got other companies right there in Gateway where our students could do internships. That's very important in high school, and I hope you vote tonight for the Gateway site.
Is there anybody else that wants to speak? Okay, I really appreciate all you people for coming in and giving your opinion on which site should be selected. Mr. Ready for number 9?
Oh, yes, sir. At this point,
Or G, I mean. Yeah.
at this point, you've received the information. If the committee wishes to have any further discussion, you can certainly do so. If someone is ready to make a motion.
Yes.
Of course, after. Go
I'll
ahead.
make a motion for discussion. Mr. Chairman, I recommend that we vote for the Gateway site.
I second the motion.
Okay. Are we going to vote like that, or are we going?
Should allow discussion on the motion at this point, sir.
It was a motion for discussion.
Okay, we have a motion to vote for Gateway, and we have a second. So,
I'll second the motion to vote for Gateway.
okay.
It was a motion for
For
discussion,
discussion,
yes?
yeah.
Discussion, all right.
Discussion, okay, we'll have
Motion and a
discussion. now.
second, and now you should receive discussion on that motion.
Yes. The reason why I asked for the breakdown of the students and where they attended, and it was supported by all the people that came up and spoke, as they only referred to Riverdale as their only choice. And Riverdale is 13 miles away from the site. However, Dunbar is 11 miles. Lehigh is 3. So why that Riverdale is considered the only acceptable education and the only safe and quality education for the people of Gateway concerns me. And based on that alone, I would have to put up a big caveat to the school board to be sure that we aren't in some way negatively affected by the perception that the other 4 schools in the zone are not acceptable or safe or quality, because they are. And other than that, of course, the numbers support it. But that is my huge concern, and I hope it is also everyone else up here.
You were speaking just of the IB program, right?
No, I am not.
Okay.
I taught at Riverdale. I do know that people put their kids into Riverdale IB program just to keep them in Riverdale and not attend the other 4 high schools in the zone. I have watched freshmen and sophomores struggle with stress, anxiety, and all other kinds of disorders just because their parents insisted they go to Riverdale and the IB program was the only reason to get there.
Mr. Chairman, this has nothing to do with the site choice.
Okay, we have any other comment? Okay, do I call the question?
Yes.
Calling the question, so if you're in favor of the Gateway, please raise your hand. Five, six, 7. 7 people. And Alva, I assume, let's go with Alva. You in favor of Alva? No? Dissent, okay. Which one? Gateway, that's, okay. So, and your vote is
I went Gateway.
Gateway?
That my only concern
Okay.
was
So
listed,
there's-
and I hope
is there
that's
anybody who
addressed.
didn't vote for Gateway? I think, because I missed a couple of hands, I guess it was down here.
Yeah. Mr. Scott, did you vote? Well, then there should be 9. There's 9 of us.
Well, yeah, but I didn't see 9 hands when I counted them. So we're unanimous then for Gateway. Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, you should entertain a motion to adjourn, sir.
I'll
make a motion to adjourn.
There we go.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.